Yeah, but that may not happen.
Well, doing okay. But doing okay.
You guys good?
I'm good too.
Are we working? We don't know if we're
One says
working.
we'll start in 15 seconds and the other in 14.
Yeah, this one says 7, so I'm good. Well, maybe.
Yeah, we don't know if this thing's working.
I'm the one person that's probably not ready. I now call the committee work session to order Monday, April 2nd, 2018, time 7 p.m. Would you please stand for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent prayer?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
These are focusing off air. Started and then we're off air.
Are we on air or not?
That's what she's saying. They're both off, it looks like. Ron, do you have anything there? Well, we'll temporary check this out, make sure that we're actually airing live.
We're on.
We're good?
It's up.
Are we on air or not?
Okay. All right. Roll call, please.
Jack Gaynor.
Did you say Gainer?
Gaynor.
Here.
Dennis McClone.
Here.
Dan Currant.
Here.
Paul Towsley.
Here.
Charlotte Whipke.
Here?
Joe Kernan.
Here.
Scott Pilot.
Here. Now, see, I like that. Incorporate the first name. Good job. Committee work session, general topics of discussion. We have a tax review appointment. Mr. Towsley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I proceed, I was just hoping someone could give me more of a detailed explanation of what they do on this board. Sorry, I know you're busy there.
Sorry.
This is
the Income Tax Board of Appeals.
Income tax review.
Income Tax Review Board. This would be if there was a challenge to an income tax determination. The city has this 2% income tax rate. So if there was a resident or a business that would challenge the determination of, we have the third-party administrator who really administrates the taxes. But if they were to challenge either finding of tax or whatever the third party would do, they have the right for an administrative appeal, which goes to Ron as the income tax administrator to make a decision. And once Ron makes a decision, they have the right to appeal that up to the board. So it's anything to do with our income tax code that's currently stated, any appeals under that code.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And as of right now, I don't believe that this board has ever convened, has it?
Yeah, I don't believe so.
So,
Very infrequently.
So tonight we're dealing with your appointment, Mr. Mayor. The mayor has decided to appoint Mr. Markey. So my only hesitation, if I'm going to be honest, is does this have to go for council approval? I assume that's why we're dealing with it. My only hesitation, if I'm going to be honest, is I know we're having trouble finding people, so that's going to be a consideration as well. But because Mr. Markey works closely with the administration, if the citizen has a perceived argument with the administration, are they going to feel they're getting a fair view from the board. So I'm not saying I won't support it. I'm just saying that's a concern I have. Is there any other conversation anybody else wants?
I guess, who was our representative before this?
Yeah, there was a board under the prior, so we changed our income tax code at the beginning of 2016, updated, maybe it was 17, updated to comply with state law.
Okay.
There was a board under the old version as well. I'm not sure it was ever filled.
Okay.
So I'm not sure there was.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I don't-
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember making any or agreeing. Does this particular position have to be somebody that is an employee of the city as well?
Does not have to be, it can be. So the code says it can be an employee of the city. It's not required to be an employee of the city.
What are the requirements for the people that, I mean, what?
I could pull the code section. It lists it in there. My recollection, it's always dangerous to recall. My recollection is it doesn't even have to be a resident necessarily, but it can be an employee or a resident of the city, but I don't think it necessarily has to be a resident of the city.
Okay.
I'm reading a line in here. She just gave me a copy.
Okay, perfect.
I don't understand the word. It says individuals who are not domiciled within the municipality. DOMIC.
Yeah, live.
That just means living.
Yeah, just means live. Yeah, living. Yeah.
Apologize for my ignorance on that word.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get a listing of what the requirements are. I'll be honest, I'm okay if I'm not on the board. I'm just stepping up just because it's easier to fill the position than not fill the position. But it's okay if there's people who are willing to step up, who are members of the community that want to come forward. I'm more than happy to step aside and let them serve. That's okay.
Well, I don't know. We've been kicking this around for how long
Right.
now?
Problem.
Yeah, and there's council appointments and mayor appointments. So I mean, we still have I think a couple more seats to fill.
May I ask,
Mr. President?
Yeah.
what do other cities do with this particular piece? Do they have someone as an employee that is filling that position, or do you have any idea?
Well, so I did this in the city of Stowe, and I was a resident who volunteered to do it in the city of Stowe. And that one, there was 5 residents who volunteered. It wasn't an employee position. But it's really, I think ideally you'd want to have residents who would volunteer and fill the board just like your other boards. But this one, we seem to be having a problem getting recruits.
And this only meets if a
As
conflict
needed.
were.
As needed. Yeah.
And there's still, like I said, we still need council to appoint 2.
2.
Right.
And I do have one name. I can address it now or address it later. I talked to an individual, Suzanne Boyer, and asked her if she would be willing to serve on this board. And she has agreed. She's expressed some interest of maybe getting into politics at some point in time, so
Right.
figured it would be a good stepping stone.
Yeah.
Isn't this the one where you had one, Mr. Kernan?
I think originally that name I had given that name for another board that we were trying to fill.
Yeah.
And I haven't approached him as to whether or not he would be willing to serve on either board. I can't imagine that it would necessarily be a problem, but I can certainly approach him about that.
But we haven't talked to him yet, so we don't want to bring his name up and say he might be able to.
Correct,
Because
yeah.
he may not be interested.
Correct.
So, yeah.
That's correct.
Is this the accountant? Or are we talking? Okay.
It's the attorney.
And there's also an accountant that we thought about contacting.
Yeah.
Figured that would be a good mix. You have an attorney, because I mean the entire thing. You know, I understand your point, and I had the same kind of perception. You know, I was concerned what the residents would think, but then looking at Mr. Markey, you know, I'm not sure I know a more ethical person than he is. He is going to judge it based on the facts that are presented in front of him, just as any of these individuals should be doing. It's nothing personal. It's just strictly business, and it's based off the facts that are presented. So that's why I was okay with Mr. Markey doing it.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if it helps council understand a little bit better, in the 4 years that I've been Director of Finance, several times a year throughout the season, I will get residents that will write to me and appeal a case to me wanting an abatement of their tax and penalty and that, and they'll cite a reason. Most of the time it's legitimate. Somebody that's new, moved into the community, wasn't aware that we had it, found out too late, they got the penalty from CCA. Those, I will, my general rule of thumb is I abate one time in that because now they understand. I've really not ever got into a situation that I was not able to handle, that they were not satisfied in the end in that. And there's been some times that I've basically just had to cite to them, this is what the rules are, this is what the law is, and they've accepted it in that and paid their bills and moved on. So it's not a huge problem in that, but if there were one that I could not settle, then of course that would go to the committee, for the committee to hear.
Yeah, Mr. Pilat, I did get a copy of the section that talks about who should be in the board. And for the mayor appointment, it said they can or they don't have to live in the city, but they may live in the city, which makes sense that you'd have that. For the mayor appointment, it can be an employee, but it can't be the director of finance because he's the income tax administrator. And that's really the only requirements.
Personally, I agree with Mr. Pilat. I don't see any reason why Mr. Markey would not and should not be trusted for this position. Secondly, it wouldn't matter who we put in there. There's always going to be somebody that's going to have something negative to say coming along. And thirdly, this is the mayor's appointment, and it should be somebody that he feels has his trust to do. And he does, and Mr. Markey was a perfect example for the plain and simple fact he is held to be legally obligated to do what he needs to do and look at it the way it needs to be looked at. So I don't have a problem with him coming forward for this.
If I could, before you go ahead, I agree. I think a good choice is Mr. Markey, and just mainly because if it does bypass Ron's office, needs to go further, I think it's good to have someone with a legal background to be able to know what he's talking about and represent the facts as far as the law is concerned. I don't have a problem at all with him. I think he's an excellent choice for it, and based on mainly on those facts that he's eminently qualified to do it. And not that someone else couldn't do it, but I would prefer to have someone that has a legal background as far as taxes is concerned also.
I would just could we maybe amend the title of this to say income tax review?
Local Board of Tax Review.
Yeah, as opposed to be a little bit more specific.
Local Board of Tax Review, and she says income tax.
Yeah, it's what the codified section says is local board of tax review. So that's why I use that language in the ordinance.
But it wouldn't change anything if we was to add income.
Nope.
I just feel it would be a little bit more clarifying for all of us as well as the public. Since we do have this other board that's an incentive tax review, I think is called.
Anybody else have feelings on that?
I agree. I mean, I'm good with that.
Any other conversation? Okay, with that, I will make a motion to add the amended with income added in there.
Amended version. Yeah, okay.
Of Resolution 45, 2018 to next week's council meeting for first reading.
And you don't...
With emergency.
With emergency language.
Okay, second that, please.
We have a motion and second to add Ordinance 45, 2018 to council's next agenda. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Tousley?
Yes.
Mr. Courant?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
All right. Next item on tonight's agenda is City of Norton versus Orville Trucking and Grading Company. Falls under mine, but I am actually going to turn this over to either Mr. Markey or Mr. Flower. Well, yeah, I guess it is Mr. Flower.
It's me on this one. If you recall, this is a situation, the concrete delivery truck was making a delivery on Houston Road in October of last year. Houston Road was recently paved, did significant damage to our road. We filed a claim with Westfield Insurance. The claim was denied. Due to the fact that our claim has been denied, we left with no alternative other than to seek legal recourse through the courts to recover our funding for our damages. This action will allow us to file against the driver, against the tow truck company, and against the concrete company.
Anyone have any questions on it? Essentially, when they went to pull the truck out, it caught the side of the road and just kind of peeled the whole thing back, and it should be replaced just as it was. I mean, it was a new road, so we're just going after funding to fix it. There's no other discussion, then I will move to add Ordinance 46, 2018 to next week's agenda with emergency.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Just one question. Is it going to go for 3 readings? Are we under any statute limitation problem, or?
We are not under a statute problem, but we're limited in what action we can take until council.
Like to get
moving.
moving.
I would appreciate waiving the reading only because we do have another repair that we need to do. We're going to front the money for that repair.
Okay.
We did a temporary repair in October. We're going to do a full depth repair when the weather breaks.
So keep that in the back of your head that probably be looking to waive the readings on that. If anybody has any objections or concerns, let's try to get them addressed before next Monday. Any others? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Under unfinished business, anybody have anything?
I just want to clarify. I know you had that other name for the board. I didn't know how we wanted to proceed.
And I was going to bring it back up right now under unfinished business for the same board that we just talked about, the tax review board. We've been trying to find members of the community to sit on this board. Nobody's been volunteering, so I went and contacted Suzanne Boyer, who has expressed interest of getting onto the board. I believe she's like a director of sales, regional sales, or is her actual work position. Married, 1 child, and been in the community probably for, I'm guessing, somewhere in the area of 7 to 10 years. I can get more information if you guys want, and then, but if we can, at least move it forward for its first read, if there's no objections, then we can go ahead and take care of at least 2 positions on the board. And like I said, there was one other one that wanted to contact, who is an attorney within the city, or not an attorney, but a accountant, and see if they would be willing to serve on the board, and that would round off the board then. It's any questions? Then I would ask that we add the appointment of Suzanne Boyer to the tax review and to next week's agenda.
Is that a motion?
Actually, I guess.
Or do I need to do that? If that's a motion, I can second it, or I can do it, whatever.
I think you just add it. It's a committee work session. You set the agenda. So I think you just would say that we're going to put it on for next meeting and do it.
And then just address it at committee of the whole at the beginning of the meeting.
Or you want to do it at next week's council meeting?
I thought that's what you were saying.
No, I'm sorry. That's your intention is to add to next week's council meeting?
No, my intention was to go ahead and just make a motion and add it to next week's right here, right now.
Yes.
But Paul's question is, does that have to come from the personnel committee? Or since we're out of the regular committee work session, general topics, we're under unfinished business, doesn't matter?
Anybody can bring something forward.
Yeah,
Well, if I may,
It'll just fall to you when it
Next
We-
week.
comes to.
we could, at committee of the whole next week, put it on under Mr. Towsley. You could assign it to his committee. He could bring it up in committee of the whole. We could add it then in committee of the whole and have a first reading next week. Just by adding it to the
that's fine.
agenda.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with. We can add it tonight or we
Let's
can-
just get it out of the way,
Okay. Then my motion so stands.
and I'll second his motion.
Motion and second. Roll call, please. Just all of council.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Currant?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot, just for our own records, if you could email us a little information.
Yeah, I'll get something from her, letter of intent from her.
That'd be great.
Anybody else have anything under unfinished business? New business?
Yes. I
Mr.
have
Gaynor?
a few things. I guess we could start by just sort of giving a background on the Western Star Cemetery situation. I started looking at that, and there were suggestions made and passed on and kicked back and forth. And so I did go ahead and get a quote for after our service department, if they were to repair the corner of the fence afterwards, then we could have it painted both sides black. It would be pressure washed first, the contractor told me. And he would pressure wash it, then give it 2 coats of paint, the entire three sides of the fence. I appreciate Mr. Fowler's thoughts on that was mentioned at the Cemetery and Parks meeting one evening here a couple of weeks ago, and I was 100% in favor of a wrought iron looking fence, but then I got to looking into it, and the expense involved in putting 3-sided fence around for the rest of the cemetery as the front is now would be, in my opinion, cost prohibitive. More likely in the neighborhood, just off the top of my head, $20,000 to $30,000 minimum for those 3 sides. Whereas if we ask Service Department to repair the 9 sections of fence that needs repaired, and then paint the fence, the gentleman says we'll have less than $2,000 even if he supplies the paint. If we were to approach certain businesses in the area, we might be able to get a donation of the paint due to the historical nature of the cemetery. Not certain of that, of course, because you had to have the plan to what you wanted to do before I would approach or anybody would approach them. So anyway, the fence itself for less than $2,000 can be repaired, painted, and people on the cemetery committee says that they would be perfectly happy with that and think that it's the way to go also. I think it's the way to go. I'm sorry, I don't think it should be torn down. I know there was discussion about tearing it down. I just don't believe that's the way to go. change my mind if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the way to go. That's pretty much covers the fence. I have that quote, and I think I sent it to everybody.
How many gallons of paint?
I'm sorry?
How many gallons of paint?
He says, the painter says approximately 10 to 15 gallon, but he can't be certain until he starts painting. So if you figure $30 a gallon, it's still going to run you the city less than $2,000 for the labor and material to paint it. And I think he's going about it the right way. I don't know the fellow, but I'm told from the person that recommended him that he's a good painter and he does good work, and he suggested to me that he thought it should be pressure washed, the whole thing, before he painted it to get all the rust and crud and everything off of it, which I thought was a good idea. So the fence itself, I think, my suggestion would be to go ahead with that, have the service department start as soon as possible so we could get the fence repaired, and immediately after that, the first couple of days, he tells me that's over 50 degrees, he can go out and start the fence, start painting and pressure washing, if everybody decides that's the way we want to go with the fence.
So if Mother Nature decides to go along with us, we might
Exactly.
be able to do it by June.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to have it done if we decide to go with that before May 30th. That's what I'm after, Memorial Day. I think there's been some discussion, so I'll bring it up now because I'm sure somebody will mention it later. There was some discussion about some people would rather work on Norton Center Cemetery first and then do Western Star later, because Western Star was rehabilitated in 2009 and they did a nice job, beautiful job, but it's went to, excuse my language, to hell since then. And there are 70 stones that need repaired and replaced there, not including this fence project, but the 70 stones that need repaired and replaced, I got a price from Summit Memorial excuse me, to do all of the work. We discussed volunteers maybe, and that could still be done, but I really believe that they know what they're doing, and really the way to go about doing it would be to spend the money and have it done properly to start with. I got a price back today from Summit Memorial of, I believe it's, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's $8,750 to reset all of the stones that need reset. And there are at least 70. Actually, I think there's closer to 75. Some of them are broken half. They're the old, I don't know, granite, marble type stuff, and they're broken half. And they have a special epoxy that they use to put them back together, and they clamp them, showed me how. They clamp them with a board and epoxy them and get them good and solid. Then they dig a foundation a few inches deep and pour concrete around them, or grout, whatever they normally use, and reset those. And we even talked about trying to find the ones that were veterans, and supposedly I'm told there are 16 in that cemetery that they know for a fact are veterans. Excuse me. And those 16 have, Lisa Merrick, when she worked on it out there, she says that there's a flag place to put a flag on their grave and everything, and some of them have the bronze markers, some of them have the stone markers that the VA provided. And if we could, through the Historical Society, and there are records, but they're not real detailed, there are records, though, that if they did some further research, we might be able to find some other veterans' locations in the cemetery. And if we could approach either the Veteran Service Commission or the VA itself. I would think we could probably go through the Veteran Service Commission and have them sort of check on it for us, if we could get their names and everything. And we might be able to get a stone provided, but that takes about 6 months, even if you know all the information. It takes about 6 to 8 months to get the stones replaced, I'm told. I mean, the monument markers. And what I was after when I started this little journey here was to get the Western Star Cemetery back to looking presentable for Memorial Day. And there's just no way possible to do it all as far as the veterans markers and everything before Memorial Day. But if we award this contract to the people to repair and replace the stones that needed done, I'm not certain of this, but I believe they can start real soon to work on it, and it would be done before Memorial Day. But now, whether they get the whole cemetery done, that's fine. If they just get the first 2 or 3 rows done, and it would be presentable to the public, and then they could continue their work throughout the summer and fall even, or for that matter, next year. I mean, it doesn't all have to be done immediately. But I think if we decide to go with the contract with Summit Memorial, then I think we should get them started on it so they'll have it looking nice before Memorial Day. There's been some talk about Norton Center, like I said, and I've got a lot of information on that, but I don't want to get too involved with 2 different cemeteries at the same time. It's been discussed because of the bicentennial coming up, but they want that one done first. Well, truthfully, the majority of the people that's going to be coming to visit for the bicentennial are not going to be going past that cemetery, as much as they are coming up Cleveland-Maslin Road, straight up Greenwich, and parade type things, and all the activities are down here. And I just personally don't think that cemetery, my own opinion, is as bad as Western Star. And also, if you drive down Medina Line Road, it is so visible as you go by. Every little thing that's wrong in there, if you slow down, you can see what's wrong. You can see the stones that are overturned, the ones that are broke. Granted, it was done back in 2009, but it's weathered pretty bad since 2009. And the stones that are in the repairs that need done in Norton Center are bigger and stronger stones. And I believe, truthfully, I don't believe it's as much work involved once they got started on the Norton Center one as there is in Western Star.
Who sits on the cemetery board?
Neva Gibson is the chair, is the one I've been dealing with, and Pat's,
Maybe we can get her in here to give us a little...
Okay, I'm not interrupting you,
Yep.
but I already talked to Neva about it, and I suggested to her, and she thinks it's a good idea, that she would even, Mrs. Mullins, I forgot, she would even be willing to talk to the cemetery board and see if they could get either a resolution passed asking us to do this work in the manner that we've discussed, and then let council decide if they want to go forward with it. But I asked her if she could possibly call a meeting as soon as possible to make up their mind as to whether they want to. I've talked to some of them already, and no one I've talked to wants to tear down the fence like we originally discussed. I was even in favor of that, but I know for a fact if we tear that fence down, it's gone. It'll never be replaced with what we discussed about the wrought iron or anything, because it's just ultra expensive. We don't have that kind of money. I didn't realize when I said it was okay, I didn't realize the cost of it. And I think the price that this fellow gave us for painting it and using our own people to repair it is absolutely the way to go. And it'll look nice, or at least I think it will, painted black. The rod or the chain link portions of it painted black. I think that's the way to go as far as the cemeteries. So anyone else have anything that they want to? Mr. Fowler?
I think Mrs. Mullins would like to interject.
And Mrs. Mullins, too. Yeah, she's on the cemetery board. I forgot about it. Yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot about you sitting there.
Denise Mullins, 2886 Wilbanks Drive, Norton, Ohio. At the Cemetery and Parks meeting that we had several weeks ago, Mr. Gaynor, you were there, and you expressed how strongly you feel about fixing up Western Star Cemetery. And the board had a very lengthy discussion, and because of extensive damage that was done to the fence from a tree falling down on it, that fence looks totally destroyed in a fairly significant section of its the way it's set up. It was also very strongly felt that a hurricane fence that goes around the side and the back area was totally inappropriate for the cemetery, and that we were going to try to get quotes on the wrought iron. Now, if that is so prohibitively expensive, perhaps there are other routes we can go, but there was nobody on the board that night who wanted that fence type reinstalled. And now to talk about trying to fix it and paint it, it doesn't seem like anything that I recall from that meeting. And you're saying that you've reached out to members of the committee since then. I know I haven't heard from you. I have not been contacted by anyone else from the board. And I'm just wondering, it seems like a lot of things have gone on with this whole fence project that I don't know when it's taken place.
I agree with you, Mr. Mullins. I think if I could snap my finger and put the fence in there that I would prefer to have in there, I would have the fence all the way around the cemetery that looks like the one in the front. Now, if we can get a quote on that and have council approve it to spend that kind of money, I'd vote for it in a minute. If the council was of the mind to spend that kind of money for a fence, I would much rather have, like you said, a wrought iron fence. We talked about it at that meeting you're talking about. Mr. Fowler suggested it, and I thought it was a good idea, and I still do if we had the money to pay for it.
Right, but your suggestions that now you've gotten quotes for fixing that fence or replacing sections of it and painting it, that was never discussed at that meeting.
No, it was not. You're right, because we stopped. If you remember, we stopped when Mr. Fowler spoke very eloquently, I might say, about replacing that fence, and I was 100% for it. I think it was an excellent idea. I still do, but when Neva and I went out there 3 times. We've been out there 3 times and looked at it, and we've had Summit Memorial, Tom, out there and looked at it 3 times. And not for the fence, but just for the stones and such. And I counted there's 9 partially destroyed sections of fence, 10-foot sections of fence. And altogether, there's 51 sections of fence there, 10-foot sections. So
why don't we do this? Mr. Fowler, can you get with the cemetery board, have them meet and put together some proposals? If you want to give your quotes to the cemetery board members, then that way we can kind of go from there, unless you have more information.
Well, I had asked Mr. Hess after the cemetery board had met probably 2 weeks ago to try to get some prices on some quality looking fence for our cemetery. I was trying to see if he got that. Normally when he gets those quotes, he sends them right to me, so I'm assuming he's not gotten it back yet. But I'll follow up and make sure, because our initial theory was to try to get some donations made by a vendor to pay for the fencing to address the cemetery, to make it look presentable. But I agree, we have some work to do.
So that I guess was going to be my question. We don't know what the wrought iron fencing would cost at this point.
We're still in the discussion
Okay.
phases
Right.
at this point in time. 'Cause
Okay.
we were all at the meeting.
So we can look at all this stuff when all the information comes in. We can look at it then.
Is there any grants out there or anything like that for cemetery fencing or repairing old headstones?
one of the things we're discussing is statutory responsibility. Really one of the things we discussed when I was in Lorraine, we had a company that donated mausoleum doors because we had a nice thief who decided to steal mausoleum doors, and they made donations to make those mausoleums the way they should be. We're trying to figure out, really, it's a good civic project. It's a great civic facility, and our goal is to try to reinvigorate folks like Mr. Gaynor who have come with a passion that want to see the facility the way it should be. So I think we have some work to do, and we've been trying to meet his goal of Memorial Day, which I understand the importance of that day.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
A tree fell on the fence, is that correct? Does the city insurance cover anything along those lines as far as city property getting damaged by a tree falling on it?
It would probably be deductibles, and if it's just a matter of several sections, I mean, you're probably not looking at much more than what the deductible would be.
I mean, is that something we could at least look at to see?
We can ask.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And Mr. Gaynor, thank you for like he said, your passion there, and we'll get them rolling on this and see what we can get done, how quickly we can get it done.
So if I may, I mean, my understanding is that the way that this should work, at least in my point of view, is that the administration should get information to the Parks and Cemetery Board, and the Parks and Cemetery Board should have a meeting, and they should make a recommendation to council, and council should look at that recommendation, and if it's a reasonable recommendation, then we do whatever we need to do to effectuate that. If we don't like the recommendation, then I guess we send it back to the Parks and Cemetery Board, and they can come up with a different recommendation. But I mean, I think we have a Parks and Cemetery Board for a reason.
Right.
Right.
Well,
So-
that's why I asked the administration to get with them.
And I also appreciate Mr. Gaynor working with the Parks and Cemetery Board. I mean, I think council should be in contact with them and giving them some suggestions.
I agree with Mrs. Mullins 100%. We didn't talk about repairing that fence or anything the night that we had that meeting here with the mayor and Mr. Fowler was here. We didn't talk about that at all because I really and truly liked his idea of replacing the fence. I think it's a great idea, and I think it would look beautiful if there's some way that the administration or anyone can come up with the money to pay for something. God, I love it. I mean, that fence in the front is beautiful. You know.
We'll put it back in their hands and the board's hand and see what they come back with us
Right.
with. All right. Any other new business? Topics for next work session?
Council President.
Oh, yes.
I have 3 items of somewhat significance. First, you may have noticed or may have received notification that via the newspaper that First Energy Solutions has filed bankruptcy. Why is this important to us? We just signed a contract with First Energy circa January regarding our electrical aggregation. We assume that First Energy is going to continue to offer those rates. There's some protections in there that I did forwards. I think I sent it to some of the council members. I'll make sure every one of you gets the email that we received from our consultant. They are not concerned with the filing. There are many energy companies that have come out the other side and have been much more, their strength was much better than when they went into bankruptcy. So they just wanted to put our mind at ease and make sure that we know that we're going to get the rate, because there typically is 3 options and all of them more favorable for us to maintain that rate. So I wanted to make sure that if anyone has a question and would contact you, I will send you the information so you all have that.
You sent it out.
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Okay.
I
See,
sent it out this
Okay.
morning with
Yeah.
the frequently asked questions
Okay.
as well.
Okay. Just want to make sure everybody has some information, and I want to let anybody who watches the meeting to know that that is something that we're working on.
My understanding is that a lot of this bankruptcy filing by First Energy has to do with the closure of the nuclear power
facilities.
plants.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, okay.
Just wanted to make everyone aware.
Thank you.
Two other points of note. We are working, or have been working, I know we discussed this, with the New Park Drive. We will be submitting the New Park Drive for a TID grant, which will be $250,000 through the Transportation Improvement District. The deadline is May 31st, I believe. But right now, we're one of two projects in the county being submitted for TID funding. So that we did talk about an assessment for that. So I just wanted to let you know. So we're applying for 2 grants and some assessment. So hopefully we're driving that cost down. And lastly, Phase 3 construction is complete. Some folks in Phase 3 are connecting. We did send out a notice. In the next week or two, probably next week is my assumption, the door hangers will be placed on all of Phase 3 doors. So everybody in Phase 3 will get a door hanger saying that they are eligible to connect. So just want to in case anyone would get any calls, there'll be the orange door hangers for Phase 3 will be going out.
On that note, isn't the meeting where Mrs. Miller coming tomorrow evening?
Yes. Well, she was here last week.
She was here last week.
And then
Right.
she'll be here again tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 5 to 7, I believe.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Well, I was just thinking if we're putting the door hangers out next week.
Well, no, that we've already sent out letters
Okay.
to every residence
In
with the
Phase 3.
CDBG dates and times.
Okay.
So everybody got that letter, but now we're going with door hangers just in case.
Oh, okay. This is
just
double indemnity.
just so someone doesn't say that you didn't put something on my door. So we mailed one regular mail, and we are taking one door to door.
Just to add, Ms. Miller will also be here the 25th at 6:30 for the Town Hall meeting, Ward 3. And we're just trying to get the word out, not to sign any contracts between now and then. So if the door hangers go out, I just want to make sure no one's getting confused by that and signs contracts and makes themselves ineligible to get assistance.
Only if they're seeking
Seeking assistance, yes.
Just so council was aware, there were 7 that showed up for the first go-around with Holly Miller. Actually, there were 8, but one person came in 10 minutes after the closing time, so hopefully they'll come back for the evening one.
And this is the last scheduled meeting she's going to have?
The 25th.
She's having the one here tomorrow, and then Mr. Krantz having a
Town hall meeting.
April
on the
25th.
Is that here or
It'll be at the community center.
And she's going to be at that as well?
Mm-hmm. It'll
What
start
time?
at 6:30.
To where she'll be able to help people
Yes. Mhm.
fill that out?
And to explain some of the terms that I think all of us had questions about, we bantered about, explaining some of the terms that are on the forms.
Do we have one of those signs that you can put out there for the public to see? Does the city actually own one of them, like a notification sign?
That's a good idea. I like that. Yep.
That.
Well, you're talking about something like we have at Williams Park that's on the corner, or what do you have in mind? Something that's
Well,
movable?
yeah, like that, or those ones that roll around on wheels, that people rent, something like that that we could get out there and actually put out for the last attempt maybe these people would have to be able to do it, at least for the town hall meeting.
Yeah. In time, I guess I'm kind of speaking a little bit ahead of things, if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead, because this is something we should be discussing at some point.
We're looking at, the Norton Kiwanis are looking at a project and coming to the city with at least cooperative funds. And I can't say a whole lot about it. I don't think it's totally finalized. Right. But we just discussed this at a board meeting last Thursday morning. And so we're looking at doing an electronic sign much like Barberton High School, the school here in Norton, and several other cities have, as sort of a notification thing that can be programmed remotely and would stand out and have two facings. That's my concept of it right now, but it will not be here between now and April 25th. So
Right. Well, how much can it cost actually if we had to rent one of them
Not much.
to do it, just to make sure that these people can't say we have not made every effort to give them some kind of notification?
I'm not sure if Elliott Sign rents them. I don't know. Where we'd...
I think the tool place
Yeah.
down on Clark Mill. Is it Clark
Probably
Mill or
Mr.
Center? Norton?
Yeah.
Center? State Bards.
State? So I think they have them there.
I'll let you be the one to put the words up.
You do what?
The one to word the sign.
You guys want to check into it?
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Any other new business? Any public comments? Was there anybody signed up? And just so everyone's aware, immediately following this meeting, we're going to have a special meeting. One item will be discussed on it, and that is it. Meeting adjourned. I now call the Norton City Special Council meeting Monday, April 2nd, 2018 to order. Time is 7:51. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Jack Gaynor,
Here.
Dennis McClone,
Here.
Dan Carant,
here.
Paul Tousley,
Here.
Charlotte Whipke,
Here.
Joe Kernan,
Here.
Scott Pelot.
Yeah, here. Before we get started, is it all right to blend these in one meeting on the streaming side? Or do
Yeah,
we have to.
I think it's probably okay. If we don't have it set up, I would just go with what we have now. And
Okay.
They always
way.
go together.
Thing is, if it seems like every time we try to stop and start,
That was my
that's
concern.
where we run into our problems. So
and when it gets posted, we'll make sure it's reflecting both
Identify.
titles.
Okay.
Yeah, we can add the title.
All right. We have no, excuse me, we have no new business. We have introduction of prior legislation. Ordinance 44, 2018 falls under my committee. I'd like to offer it for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance accepting the bid of Sable Services Incorporated doing business as Sable Asphalt in an amount not to exceed $54,648 for the Norton Administrative Parking Lot Project and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Reason that we're trying to move on this is so obviously, hopefully the weather's going to be breaking here pretty quick, and we want to make sure that we get our place set within the construction company so we can get this taken care of. So at this time, I move to waive the third reading.
I'll second.
Motion and second to waive the third. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President. I had a call today. I'd just like to clarify that, yes, this actual ordinance is for $54,648, even though the bid came in at $49,680. We're just making sure that we have the 10% so that we can cover any extra charges that may arise. If we don't have to use it, we won't, and it'll go back into the fund. But we need to make sure we do that so we don't have to come back and get more money again.
Any others? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Courant?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
This time I move to adopt ordinance 44, 2018.
Second.
I do have just a comment to make, Mr. Palat.
Yes.
After much considering and thinking over this, when I look at the parking lot, it's in better shape than a large percentage of our roads in our community. And we just paid to reseal this parking lot last summer. I'm in favor of replacing it. I just think the timing's wrong. I think we're a couple, season or two ahead. So for that reason, I don't believe I'll be supporting this tonight.
All right. Any others?
Well, I would say that last year, even after we had it resurfaced or the cracks filled in, I came up and I actually got hold of the administration because I was asking what is wrong with our parking lot. We just put out this money and it doesn't look very good. And I was told at that time it was just, this is all we could do at this time, and get it done to last as long as what it did. And seeing as how we are getting it a little cheaper, because we are getting it, well, I think about $15,000, am I close to that, as to what we were quoted last year to do the whole job. I was for getting it fixed last year when I came in and seen what it looked like. Maybe 3 weeks after it had been done, it had went downhill that much. So I'm for doing this. We used to have a council person who used to like to point out that this is where people come in to do business with us. It's where all our citizens come, and it didn't look very good upon any of us to not have it fixed up, and to make sure that the handicapped people can get up the sidewalks easier and everything else. And we're doing a lot for our roads. We're doing a lot more for these roads in the last few years and has been done for many, many years prior, and looking to do more. So we do have to maintain down here where the public and the business people come as well.
Any others?
Got a question.
Yes.
When you do work like this, is there any implied or contractual guarantee of the work for a time period? How long should this actually last us?
The pavement, just so I'm clear, or
this
the
work?
Because we kind of have two conversations going on. I just want to make sure I understood the crack sealing project or the paving.
I'm thinking the paving,
Okay.
because that's probably the larger portion.
So provided we do preventative maintenance, and part of the issue we had not done preventative maintenance, when the cracks start to show, we should be sealing the parking lot, which we started last year. We started the parking lot down here. We're going to seal the parking lot over there by the baseball fields. We didn't do that last year because we didn't have the money. But really, you should seal them every year, and they will last a lot longer than they did. And that's what our goal is, to get into a cycle. And Mr. Towsley, I think many of us had this conversation. My initial thought was to do it in thirds because the price was so large last time. And you know, we tried the crack seal. There's some large potholes out there that have somewhat come to surface now, and I understand Mr. Towsley's concern. And you know, we're actively trying to address the road situation. But we do need to try to do what we can to fix out here, because it really is getting in disrepair, unfortunately. And we tried the crack seal, and just due to the condition, didn't hold up because of the water. So, but if we do our job, it should really last 10 to 15 years.
If I can ask a question, it would seem to me if we take care of this problem now before it gets really bad, then we have less work to do in order to seal or in order to pave it later. In other words, what I'm saying is it's in bad shape, but I mean, if it crumbles and we have a lot of potholes, it seems to me there's a lot more work we need to do to get the base ready to actually put the asphalt down to make it last.
And that's genuinely why the 10% is in there, because if when we grind this, we find any base repair that needs done, we need to do that before we put the asphalt over, and that's why the 10% is in the contract. So, but yeah.
And as was mentioned, this is about $15,000 cheaper than the quotes that we received last year. So.
And it was only a slurry that they put on last year. I mean, it was we hoped at that point in time that we would get a little more time out of it, but it didn't seem to hold up for us.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Courant?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
No.
Being no further business to come before council, the meeting is adjourned.
Is this off already?
Not that I know.
I haven't received it either. He said everyone should have got it. It starts this month.
One for you, one
I don't think we've gotten it.
I haven't gotten it yet.
I mean,
Okay. Have you got